We often call human trafficking the crime of vulnerabilities, right? So it's traffickers preying on some vulnerability or some need that's not being met that they can fill that or address that. And mental health is a great example of a vulnerability of a youth and an individual, right? Like if there's some sort of need that is being disrupted because of mental health, and there's connection with someone else, right? And they're not able to find that. Kids are going to go out and find that somewhere else. And oftentimes that's online because that's the place that they're able to escape, as you mentioned, or at least be able to go. And so that's where traffickers are going to be. And so if we can reduce those vulnerabilities, we can prevent human trafficking. I always say this to people of like, if you're reducing food insecurity, you're preventing human trafficking. If you're doing these things that are, you're helping with youth mental health, you're reducing human trafficking because that is another vulnerability that a trafficker can't use to leverage against a kid or to coerce an individual to get them to, and sometimes it's away with this individual, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's just to manipulate them.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode. Today we're talking about an issue that most people know exists, but very few truly understand, and that's human trafficking. And to help talk about this, we're bringing a special guest, Josh Loaiza from Three Strands Global Foundation. And Josh has been on the front lines of trafficking prevention and helped educate tens of thousands of students, parents, educators, and community leaders across the U.S. and in Canada. His work has helped shape prevention programs now being used in schools across multiple states, and he served on several anti-trafficking coalitions and task forces dedicated to protecting vulnerable people and stopping exploitation before it starts. And I believe this is a conversation that everybody needs to have and be aware of, because trafficking doesn't look the way Hollywood portrays it. It's not all the Taken movies. There's an aspect of that. I know the big ones have been, Taken and The Sound of Freedom, which are very real things, but there's other things happening in plain sight that just people aren't really aware of. So, Josh, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on to talk about this with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to have this conversation. It's been a minute since I've been able to do something like this, so I'm really excited to dive into it and get to chat more about this. I always love getting an opportunity to raise awareness for this issue and to get to talk more about this topic.
Absolutely. And I think that's the first thing I kind of want to hit on is, there's when people think about human trafficking, they automatically think on the sexual aspect. Virtually everybody's seen all the Taken movies. They were huge. Sound of Freedom was huge. So everybody thinks of the sexual exploitation and human trafficking, but that's just a part of it. Can you kind of go over some of the other stuff while human trafficking kind of takes shape?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I've done a lot of training for the school environment, and I'll ask that question, like, what do you think of when you hear the word trafficking? And a lot of times it's sex trafficking, prostitution, different things like that come up. But the reality is trafficking is an umbrella, human trafficking is an umbrella term, right? It covers both sex and labor trafficking, especially when we look at a global picture. Labor trafficking is going to be even higher than sex trafficking. And it's something that's affecting community all across this country. And I think if we get too focused on, one specific element of it, just sex trafficking, or even like one, as you mentioned, the movie Taken, one way that it looks like with kidnapping, we're going to miss out on what is far more commonly happening in front of us. And labor trafficking is a great example of that, right? Like if we're only thinking sex trafficking, we're missing the elements of labor trafficking that could be happening in front of us, especially in a number of different communities, agricultural communities. Even an example that I've seen of labor trafficking was a door-to-door sales crew. And I'm not saying all of them are that way, but there was one that came around to our house and was selling magazines. And one of my colleagues famously says they bought the magazines and they said, oh, we'd send them in the mail. And then they never actually sent them. And it ended up being a scam. And they had trafficked these kids to go out and day in and day out knock doors and try and get money from people. So it can be right in front of our faces. And sometimes we don't realize it and we don't know what to look for. And that's why awareness is so huge, right? That's why it makes such a difference. It's because when we know what to look for, if we at least are more aware of what this could look like, we're going to start seeing it more.
Another big one is organ trafficking, right? That's another entire. I
That
know in
there's
like a
another element of that for sure. I mean, I am not as familiar with that aspect of it, but I mean, I know that's a dynamic that many people have suffered from and experienced.
Now, with the labor trafficking, like I feel like this kind of stuff it's not it's right in everybody's face, like you said. It's in every pretty much in every community, and it's these people are smart about it. Like you wouldn't think that like some kids knocking on your door and selling a magazine that they're being trafficked like that. Most people think of, some kind of Asian massage parlor type thing, in shady parts of a big city or something like that. People don't think, well, the suburbs or something, there's stuff going on there. But I think the people running this stuff aren't stupid like that. I mean, the hiding in plain sight is probably one of the main tactics being used for these things.
Yeah, isn't it's sad, and then one of the things I think people don't realize is the prevalence of it happens in every community. I mean, it can happen in our own backyards, and we don't like to think that. We don't like to think, hey, this could hit home for us. This is, it's always a problem that's somewhere else, and especially with human trafficking, it's easy to put it in a box and say that's happening somewhere abroad, right? That's happening in Eastern Europe, or again, with the movie Taken, it's happening when people get off the airport when they're on vacation somewhere. But the reality is it's happening close to home. I remember early on when I was doing trainings for schools, I went to a charter school in the area, which is a very like affluent part of the state. And my colleague and I were going in, and I remember us talking to each other. I wonder if they'll even listen to us because they aren't going to assume it's happening here. At the end of the training, a lady came up to me and said, "Hey, thank you so much for coming here. My son goes to the school, and he was actually trafficked, and they needed to hear that here. So I appreciate that." And she proceeded to tell me a little bit more about the story of the son like connected with this trafficker through a chat feature in video games, and he had essentially coerced this individual to, while still living with his parents, go and be trafficked on the side and be forced to perform certain things for this guy that would then make the money, and then he'd go back, and the parents would say like, something's wrong, like what's going on, and they kept asking questions, but they just didn't know. And because they weren't as informed on this issue, they really weren't able to get him help for a while. And so, the reality is, as you said, like that is something that can hit home in so many different ways with technology and the way that we're opening this gateway to really anybody in our kids, phones right in their hands, right? Or in a computer. Like there's so many instances of them being connected with these individuals through something as mundane as a DM or a chat feature in a video game that they play. So, yeah, it's sad to see how much it can really hit home. And again, no community is safe with the rise of this technology being just everywhere.
Yeah, how prevalent is that now? Because I've actually heard stories from parents and victims of this, like children, like, 11, 12 years old playing in like these chat video games, like Minecraft is one. There's a couple other ones, Trey. I don't know the correct names, but just someone pretending to be another child on there and pretending to be their friend and saying, "Hey, you want to meet up and do this?" How prevalent is that now today? Because it has to be getting worse and worse.
Yeah, it's incredibly common, right? Like I don't maybe don't have a great statistic for you. What I can say is that human trafficking is the second largest criminal enterprise, and it's the fastest growing. When you think about the first is drugs and the third is guns, and how much like the rhetoric is talked about, those are very much in the regular conversation, and human trafficking is not. So, but that's an incredibly common tactic for an individual to try and recruit someone, because it's so much easier for them to be able to sit there and talk to multiple people on a regular basis. It used to be a thing where they would have to go in person or, try and connect with people in that way. So of course we said, hey, stranger danger, look out for the white van, all these different things. And great, that was maybe effective in a previous time. But as we're in this day and age with technology, like things have evolved significantly. And
And like AI too, because now you can pretend to be someone else in a chat video. Like you
that's
could
a great
pretend to be
point.
a child talking. Like it's scary. Like I see some of these videos and I'm like, you don't know who you're talking to. Like, unless you can pick up on it, you wouldn't even know.
It's a great point, right? Like with and this is only going to continue to grow. Like when we think about how we have to keep our kids safe, we really have to focus in not on
Mhm.
what is one specific instance, but more like skills that we can build, protective factors, and different things that, one, reduce vulnerabilities, and two, like things that can translate beyond that. So we have curriculum in the classroom for students, and one of the things that we ask them to do is really hone in on this concept we call the inner voice, because all of us have some innate gut instinct, or
Mhm.
we call it the inner voice, but there's something inside us that can let us know when something is feeling off, right? We have
Mhm.
that sense. And even as adults, we struggle sometimes to listen to that. And so we're teaching kids at a young age to listen to that, to practice that skill of becoming aware of when that's going off and saying, hey, something feels off about this. Because yeah, there's going to be instances in 10 years that we don't even, technology has come out that we don't even know that is now being leveraged by traffickers, just like AI, like you mentioned. So it's a great point. With the way that technology is rising, we have to find these different, tools and protective factors that can help keep kids safe, that aren't just specific to right now, right? They're universal.
Right?
Mhm.
I would think even there's been a severe decline in the mental health in kids. And today's, it's as time's gone on, it's just getting worse and worse with depression, kids on depression medication. I got to think that that would have to play a factor in kids even falling for this stuff online because they're looking for, whether it be, a release or an escape or some joy or happiness. So if you have these predators essentially preying on children through their own, trauma and stuff they're going through, it's just gonna make it worse and worse. So I feel like the the mental health of our teens and children really need to be considered in all this as well.
We often call human trafficking the crime of vulnerabilities, right? So it's
Mhm.
traffickers preying on some vulnerability or some need that's not being met, that they can fill that or address that. And mental health is a great example of a vulnerability of a youth and an individual, right? Like if there's some sort of need that is being disrupted because of mental health, I mean, there's connection with someone else, right? And they're not able to find that. Kids are going to go out and find that somewhere else. And oftentimes that's online, because that's the place that they're able to escape, as you mentioned, or at least be able to go. And so that's where traffickers are going to be. And so if we can reduce those vulnerabilities, we can prevent human trafficking. I always say this to people of like, if you're reducing food insecurity, you're preventing human trafficking. If you're doing these things that are, you're helping with youth mental health, you're reducing human trafficking, because that is another vulnerability that a trafficker can't use to leverage against a kid or to coerce an individual to get them to. And sometimes it's to run away with this individual, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just to manipulate them, and it can be so coercive. I mean, I've kind of alluded to this a little bit, but I do want to like make clear, like it can be incredibly coercive in a sense of like, oftentimes they'll like shower the kid with gifts, or like again, a kid who's not had a lot of people, or is feeling really depressed or down, and you have this individual come in and you know pump them up, tell them they're amazing and they're great, and give them a bunch of gifts, and they've not heard that from anywhere else. All of a sudden, this trafficker is being very attractive to this individual. And then they start to say, hey, I gave you all this stuff. You owe me. Why don't you do this for me?
Mhm.
This one time. I just need it because, and then it escalates and escalates and escalates. And so it's, as you said, it's not very like stark. It's going to be a coercive, manipulative process, because they're smart, right? They understand that if I showed up and said, hey, I got this great idea. You were going to do all the work and I'm going to take all the money. Everybody's going to say no immediately, right? Like, but if they come to them and say, hey, I gave you this, you owe me this, and use guilt and shame and blame, and like, I'm the only one that cares about you. I'm the only one that loves you. Do what I say. It's going to be far more powerful.
I think for parents, this is the big thing, safety and connection. If your child knows they have emotional safety and intelligence, they know they can come to you when something's off. They know that you're not going to, these situations where it comes to like trust, safety, and needs met. It starts with your connection with your child. So if you're, let's just say, even if people don't know better, you're always screaming out your child, or they're always getting punished when something goes wrong. It's usually where the vulnerability and the predators pick up on that with children. Like, "Oh, don't, I gave you something, don't tell your mom," or something's wrong. Well, I'm not going to tell because I'm going to get in trouble. So I'm going to hide that this person's doing this. Or they threaten the child, like, "Oh, I'll hurt your family if you don't do what I say." And, so it's about being really connected with your children too. You need to be paying attention to who they are, how they're feeling. And that's more than just saying, hey, how are you after school? That's what was the best part of your day? Who did you talk to? Who did you meet? And it's like, I feel like as parents, this is a big one. This is why there's such a big vulnerability with children, is if you're not really in tune and connected to your child, you'll miss all of this altogether because they're not going to tell you the minute that that safety and that connection is gone and that trust. It starts with us as parents.
Absolutely. Can I share a story about that? This one that was so impactful to me and a lesson that I want to adopt in my own household, but a mom who had kind of, as you said, where she had basically a non-judgmental stance with her son and said, if you're ever in trouble, you can come talk to me. You won't get in trouble. Just come talk to me and tell me, and we'll be okay. And
Mhm.
we'll figure it out. And kept this sort of relationship with the son to know that, which was really smart on her part and really like wise sort of foresight there. Well, the kid ends up, and this is a really tough dynamic that's happening to young boys in the school systems these days, but really in general, and it's called sextortion. And to give just a brief summary on it, it is typically where an individual poses as an attractive female, sends illicit photos to a young boy asking for illicit photos in return. He sends them, and as soon as they got that, they use it as blackmail to say like, hey, now you owe me money, send me this money, or I'm going to share this with everybody, or I'll send this to your parents or your family or whatever.
Exactly.
And so this kid did that, right? He ended up sending the photos and then had this blackmail situation show up and got really scared and didn't know what to do and, was really struggling on where to go, and eventually went to his mom and said, "Listen, you said before, I know we had this conversation, I wasn't going to get in trouble. I did something really stupid. Can I tell you?" And she was able to get him some help and ultimately, save his life. Like there's been many instances where that's led to a young boy committing suicide because they felt like they had no other option. Right. And so just
Mhm.
even as you said, just plugging into your kid enough, having that open door so that if something got serious enough, they could come talk to you with no punishment, no judgment, anything like that. Thankfully, like they had that relationship. And that's something
Mhm.
that, again, I would love to emulate and feel like for parents, it's a lesson in that for sure, because that could have ended completely different.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just like that situation alone. Like when you have guilt and shame on every situation, like, and some parents don't even realize they do this, right? They don't realize they stuff the system. But being able to tell your child that no matter what, there's just that I'm open to you to come to me with anything. And it's not going to be screaming, yelling, and God forbid abuse. That is what protects your child in a world where you can't always protect them. You're not going to be able to be there every second of their life, let alone if they're going to public school or they're out there as teenagers. You set the foundation to where even if you're not there, they're going to see through things. They're going to see through manipulation. They're going to see, oh, you know what? This is way over my head. I know I can go talk to my mom or dad. And that's a difference between the situations that could be life and death situations. It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. We call these protective factors in our curriculum, right? Like the more we can build these protective factors, we can keep these kids safe. And there's a number of them, right? Like one of the things we identify within our materials is what we call safety plan. So you have, who could I talk to? Who is the trusted adult in my life that I could go to and talk to? And it's designed around the same idea of like when there's that inner voice goes off, who can I talk to? Who would be a person that I could go talk to? So as you said, like we help these kids try and understand, and these are lessons in the household as parents you can,
Mhm.
adopt with these kids to say like, okay, when that alarm bell goes off, this lesson that we've been working on, when that starts to go off, who can you go talk to? Even if it isn't immediately parents, right? Like even if the parents aren't around, like who else is trusted adults in their life? Because sometimes, it could be a coach, could be a teacher,
Mhm.
sometimes there's people in their lives that they may, I don't know, whatever the situation has, may give them an opportunity to go to.
Yes, and then there's like another aspect of this too. We know someone recently that lost someone to trafficking. Like in this situation, it was a spouse trafficking his spouse
Mm.
and selling her off and abusing her and stuff, and in a trafficking situation that nobody could see through, and like that ended tragically because she's dead now. But it's like that situation, like how do people pick up on that? This is in your family, right? This is someone that you think is okay, trusted, and they're trafficking their own family members or they're trafficking their children. Like this is a real thing too.
Actually, nearly half of all child trafficking involves a family member of some kind, whether that's a parent. aunt and uncle or some dynamic, but yeah, that is unfortunately far more common than we like to realize and admit. And again, like, it breaks down those misconceptions, right? Like, if our
Mhm.
misconception is it's a white van in the parking lot, abducting, kidnapping, we're going to miss what is far more commonly signs of what trafficking could look like, especially in our own backyard. But those are tough. I mean, the family member, especially the romantic partner like that, that is an incredibly difficult thing to be able to identify. And the parent-child dynamic too is a real big challenge. I spent years working with school staff to be able to identify signs of abuse in their students, and that was one of the biggest challenges and hurdles that we ran into. Is they may have said like, oh, we talked to the parents, like everything's okay there, like it's all good, when they had a feeling of like
Mhm.
trying to make a mandated report. And that's, it was one of those things we had to really educate them on to understand the the reality of what trafficking looks like. And I'm sorry to hear about your friend of that experience in that situation. That can be just so tough to go through and to be able to find a way through.
It's just I feel like it happens so much, like, Trey, I did a couple episodes on some, like, sexual abuse, and it's like, people talk about, sex trafficking all the time and, like, an outside of the walls of, like, anyone knowing each other, and I'm like, I don't think people realize how much sexual abuse and trafficking goes on in family systems, and that's missed, like, often, and I guarantee you it's worse than we can imagine because I know so many victims that never came forward and never talked about it, and they're adults now, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, this happened to me, but I couldn't tell anybody. Nobody was there to help me or save me."
I think the statistic is 1 in 5
Mhm,
individuals who experience sexual abuse at some point in their lifetime, which is,
mhm,
I mean, startling to think about,
Crazy.
especially if you put those numbers in when you in a room with 100 people. You might think that like, wow, that is startling. The amount of, I mean, how prevalent that is. And again, to your point, like, it's not something we talk about, and
mhm,
understandably in many cases, but it is something that we're trying to bridge, right? Like, the more we can have conversations like this and raise awareness for this issue, the more we can, support those who have experienced it, and it gives them opportunities to speak up and speak out and to feel some of that healing too. Right. That's another dynamic of what our organization does, is help individuals who experience trafficking heal,
mhm,
and they call it reintegrate with society in that
mhm,
situation. And it's such an important dynamic of it. I had an incredible experience to present with a survivor of human trafficking who was a graduate of our program. And she was actually the first graduate. And we got to speak. And at the end of our presentation, it was to like 300 Rotarians. At the end, she got a standing ovation. And as we were driving back, we were leaving the place, she said, "Wow, like I did this. Like I'm a boss woman now. Like I'm doing this. Like this is amazing. I never thought I'd be here." Just to see that journey and that healing is it's incredible, and that only comes from raising awareness on this, making this so that we can have conversations around it.
mhm,
And looking up some statistics for some of the stuff in preparation for our episode today, I was actually kind of surprised on some of the numbers that I was seeing because, most people picture that stranger kidnapping a child or, again, some f- foreign person in the country that's being exploited for citizenship or something like that. But the human trafficking hotline analysis found that the traffickers, it was 43% of all of them were employers, 26% were family members, and 22% were intimate partners. And I mean the family members and intimate partners, and as you guys were talking like that surprised me. Just like I knew it was happening and it wasn't being talked about as much, but to equate almost half of all human trafficking that was reported to the National Trafficking Hotline was family members and intimate partners kind of blew my mind. And I wanted to ask you, like, why is the public image of trafficking so different from what the data is showing? Like, why are people so off base on what we think? Is it what the mainstream media is portraying? Is it because we're too lost in, Hollywood? Like why is there such a lack of awareness on what the real problem is and where this stuff is mostly coming from?
It's a great question. I have kind of two schools of thought on this. I think one, definitely sensationalism, right? The idea of in the media, in order to get attention and for things to sell, they have to make it like the most, Hollywood version of something to be able to show it. So like when people first learn of trafficking, oftentimes it is the movie Taken. It is like something on TV sensationalized in that way. Now I will give them credit that they've started to do a better job. I've heard cases of like Law and Order or something like that. It's done a really good job at breaking down. And we actually had a time within our organization where we would do analysis of like different shows and movies and how they portrayed it, and to kind of tie it back and help us talk about it and think about it. So I think absolutely the way we first learn about this issue is through media. The other end of it is that it's a little bit tougher of a topic for people to focus on, right? Like my wife, bless her heart, works for a nonprofit that does vision care for kids, and it's called Vision to Learn. It's an incredible organization, but they like much easier for people to wrap their head around and have a conversation and say like, yeah, we're giving eyeglasses to kids and helping out. Like that is much easier topic for people to grasp. Human trafficking is ugly and can be traumatizing, and it's incredibly difficult for, I think, for a lot of times for people to keep in their mind on a regular basis. And so a lot of times that gets kind of pushed to the side, and we like to be able to put it in a box that we can make it make sense in our world. And again, because we can say, okay, the movie said this is happening somewhere else. It looks like this. Okay, good. It's put in that box. I can move on and move forward. And I understand trafficking now, and I don't have to worry about it or think about it ever again. And that's the wall that we have to break down. Like I had a very interesting conversation with a survivor of human trafficking that talked about this idea of like, hey, this isn't, I get that it's kind of tough, but at the same time, like, remember, these individuals have lived this, like they lived this experience. We have to stop sitting and making an excuse of like, wow, this is a really difficult topic to talk about. It can sometimes be scary and ugly and all of that, but like we have to keep in mind, like people have lived this and this is their life and experience. Like for us to sit in it a little bit longer it isn't too much to ask. And that's really like the message that we have to start conveying out into the world is that, and I think that's how we reduce, a bit of that hesitancy to talk about it. So I would say it's those two things. That's what I've noticed from it. I mean, obviously media, but there is a general sense of like when someone learns about it, it's like, whoa. And they're very like passionate and understand like, yeah, we want to stop that. That's bad. Let's help. But pretty quickly they try and get it out of their mind and move forward and move on to something else that they don't have to keep into their mind. So us being able to sit in it a little bit longer and be able to handle that and say like, you know what, this is someone's life that they've gone through. We have to step up and we can do this. We can have hard conversations. We can keep these things present in the top of mind and realize that this is happening to be able to fight it, right? We can keep reality there for us to be able to stop it.
Well,
And
and
there's
like when you mentioned, the digital age too, like me and Trey did an episode on I'm going to use different words, not get banned, but the Grape Academy. So now you have husbands and spouses drugging their wives or whatnot and raping them and doing horrible things and then selling the content online to other men. That's and then these women some of these women don't know this is happening, so they can't do anything about it. They can't speak up, or they might see themselves online someday. Like that's a whole nother level of trafficking because they have no idea. They don't have to go anywhere. They're abusing their spouse or whatnot without their knowledge half the time, and they can sell it all and people buy it in exchange for it. I mean, that's a whole nother avenue now with the age of technology that's opening up. That's just going to add to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love the way that you kind of articulated how there's so many different facets of the way that trafficking can look, and really, it's about like broadening our horizon, our perspective about like it is. And I know I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but it is important, I think, to reiterate that it's about broadening our perspective to see all these different things. That was one dynamic I haven't heard of before in the past. So to even hear that has broadened my perspective to say, like, you know what, there are so many different ways that this can look. And as a system and as a society, like we really have to start to think outside the box a little bit about how do we address this when we're thinking about if that's the way trafficking can look. And there's so many different,
Hmm.
it's an ever evolving issue. How do we get in front of this? How do we start to stop these types of things and ultimately prevent this from happening when it's
And there's the aspect of people feeling, because one of the things predators and stuff do is I like to isolate their victims, make them feel alone, make them feel like there's little hope. But, you even threw out there that 1 in 5 people have been, sexually abused in some way today, and that number's staggering. Like, how many people aren't coming forward with stuff just because they feel deep shame or regret or even some type of responsibility or guilt with what happened to them? I feel like if everybody came forward and was actually very open about what was going on, that would shine so much light on the problem and even ways that we could help prevent this stuff, bring awareness to it, and get people the help that they need. Because I mean, these people, there's people just walking around broken, and nobody knows how broken they are as a result of what's happened to them, and nobody should be alone with any of that.
Yeah, you never know what someone's gone through. And I think it's such an important reminder, and an important part of it too, is that like being trauma informed is essential to, I think as a society, for us to adopt this mentality of, and we did this a lot in the school system, right? Because you'd run into kids who were oftentimes like the problem, quote unquote, problem kid, right? Like causing a lot of issues, disrupting, getting fights. And the traditional way of looking at it was like, what's wrong with you, kid? What's going on? What's wrong with you?
No, what's
We need to
really
shift.
going on to make you respond this way to life?
Exactly. What happened to you? Right? What happened to you that's causing you to react this way? Oprah wrote, and I don't know the other author, and I should, but her book is called that, like What Happened to You, and it's all about this concept, as you were kind of alluding to, Trey, of having that these experiences that people have had. We need to start shifting our mindset, which I think that instead of this judgmental stance of what's wrong with you, right? Because some of these kids, the things are happening when they're very young. 1 in 5, I think I don't know the statistic if it's youth or just in general, but still it's a very high percentage of youth that are experiencing this, right? The average age of a trafficker approaching their victim is 13. Right? So these are kids
Hmm.
who don't know any better, right? Like, and we're blaming them, saying like, hey, what's wrong with you, as if there was something that they did. The reality is like,
Hmm.
what happened to you? Someone else there's an adult that is accountable in this situation. And if we can approach people in our life in general, it doesn't matter what relationship you're with, like it absolutely will shift the way you see people when you start to think of that behavior is communication, right? It's communicating that something else is happening
Hmm.
deeper. Mm. If there's something, if kids acting out is causing issues, like there's probably something else going on in that situation.
Hmm.
Well, I know most victims know their trafficker as well. Like that's a very that's I saw it was over like 80% of these victims know their trafficker. And with that, grooming happens way before the exploitation. So I wanted to ask you, with that in mind, like what are some of the earliest signs of grooming that people completely miss? Because there's always this buildup that's happening, right? Because everybody wants to focus on, well, how do you prevent that one message, that straw that broke the camel's back, but nobody's looking at the big build up to it. So what are some of those early signs of that grooming that, parents or people or even employers could completely be missing on stuff that's going on there day to day?
That's a great place to get into too. To break down the grooming process a little bit for your listeners, essentially it starts in identifying this individual, finding out what their needs are, what that vulnerability is, and then meeting that need. So when we start to see that need being met, whether it's, a youth that all of a sudden is referencing frequent travel, maybe to foreign exotic cities, or they're being showered with gifts and all of a sudden they have a sudden change in material possessions. Maybe they start wearing clothes that are incredibly inappropriate for the weather or the season, timing, those types of things. It's this dead giveaway, right? These are starting to be red flags of like, well, something else is going on here, right? Maybe they start referencing a noticeably older boyfriend or girlfriend, someone that's incredibly controlling. Maybe they're all of a sudden they have 2 phones when they normally only had one. And that second phone could be, they could say like, oh, or they get really upset if you start to try or you ask about it, you try to take it from them or what have you. These start to cue into like, okay, something is a shift in what we're seeing in behavior wise. Or they start to, as I said, reference this other individual that's now popped up in their life. and they're controlling in some way, telling them they can't spend time with their friends, telling them, well, their parents don't understand them. Like you start to see a sudden shift in that way as well. There's a number of issues. I can't go over all of them, but like that's just to get your mind kind of thinking of like, hey, the sudden shift in behavior in some way is a great sort of, even if it's subtle, you're starting to notice like, wait a minute, they were doing something and have been consistently, and now I see a sudden shift. In general, to me, it feels like as a parent, that would be a good place to kind of cue in on and say like, okay, we parent, employer, friend, but to sort of say like, hey, I've noticed a shift in that could be a great conversation starter. Like, hey, I've noticed something different about you. Well, what's going on? I noticed that you've started to do this. What's going on? Just to sort of bridge that gap and start to have that conversation.
Mhm.
Because we
Right.
talked about, man, like there is with mental health and with all this, like to be able to check in on these individuals, to have a conversation with each other and to be able to bridge that gap so that this individual knows that, hey, you're there for them, that you can show up and that you're gonna from a non-judgmental way show up for them. Much like the story I told a little bit earlier, that can change lives. That can save somebody's life just by letting them know, hey, you're there for them, that you can support them, that if there's something going on in their life, they can talk to you, and maintaining that non-judgmental piece where you're like, hey, I'm not going to go tell somebody if you don't want me to. I'm not going to go do this, that, and the other thing, or be transparent if you have to by law. Like there are those things that can really create a dynamic of trust that could change somebody's life.
Absolutely. I guess I'd like to hone in on the biggest number percentage wise that on that study that I found that was 46% was done by employers. And, we have so many teenagers, starting working at, 15, 16 years old. Is there anything specific that you've noticed with cases with employers and teens that are kind of some dead giveaways or things that at least parents should be like, I should look into this, or I should start asking questions? I know one sounded pretty that you had mentioned, a second phone showing up kind of out of the blue, and oh, that's just a work phone or something like that. But is there anything else that, I'm thinking statistic wise, what's the big giveaways here?
Yeah, well, when something sounds too good to be true, it definitely usually is. We have a whole kind of section within our high school curriculum that points to that because, as you alluded to, it's a common tactic that we see, and oftentimes the way that it is approached is we're promising a kid something that is way too good to be true, and so that's a clearly like a common red flag. Also, being able to the activity that we have in the curriculum is we have multiple job postings, and the kid goes through and they have an opportunity to say, okay, is this a legitimate one, or does this something feel off about this? And if so, what would the red flag be? Some of them are very real, and some of them are also fake. And so it's going through and seeing like on that job posting or that listing, like, is the company legitimate? Researching, and do they have a full website? Did they reach out to you and say like, hey, because a common tactic is to say like, hey, you have just the look that we're looking for. Come be a model for us. Or in today's day
Modeling,
and
yeah,
age,
it's a big one.
yeah, in
Hmm.
today's day and age, it's you have just the look to go viral, right? We can make you go viral. I've got it. Come over to my place and we'll do this whole. So it's but understanding like this is not something that the modeling or going viral, like it's not something that just automatically someone's approaching. This is a real career that takes work and
Hmm.
effort to get into. There's a lot of people trying to do it. Like it's not something where someone just walks up to you and says, "Hey, you're perfect for it." Maybe there's a situation that's happened one time in the past,
It's
but
rare. It's rare.
very,
Yeah.
very, very rare. And so it's things like that that may cue you in to say like, hold on a second, this doesn't this doesn't add up. Something's off about this. Are they asking them to work kind of crazy hours? What are the tasks they're actually asking this individual to do? There was one that I mentioned the magazine one, but another one that I had heard was a case of these individuals that came to a community trying to find specifically runaway youth and say like, hey, come work for us in the pot fields in California. So you got a 15-year-old kid saying, hey, you can smoke all the weed
Mhm.
that you want. Come work for us. You'll make all this money. That's like a dream to these kids. So they're like, great. Yeah, let's go do it. And it ends up being a trap and they don't get paid anything. And because at the time, a lot of it was illegal, a lot of it growing into the situation. So like they couldn't really go and get help. Like they felt, helpless that they would
Ratting
get
on
in trouble.
themselves.
Basically, they would go to jail. So they couldn't, and they felt stuck and trapped. And ultimately, like that was the situation that it ended up being. But I do want to like, emphasize that they are very coercive and manipulative. And so it's really
Mhm.
cueing in on that feeling that you get where it's like, hold on, that little like hesitation of like, man, something feels just a little bit off on this. Like this sounds great, but like, can I be just a tiny bit skeptical? Not to be, completely skeptical of everything, but like a tiny bit of like, hold on a second, let me make sure this is legitimate.
Right.
Like teaching your children mindfulness too is a good way because that teaches them to be in tune with themselves. Like that's something like we teach our children, like being aware of yourself, how you feel around certain people. And again, your parenting, if your children feel safe around you, their intuition is going to kick in because the minute they're around someone with bad intentions, children feel everything. Like we have our son Xander, and he's like the one that feels like everything. Like if someone's in a bad mood, he starts acting like, oh, something's up. Like I'm in a bad mood now. Like he responds to everybody's behavior. Like if you're like you have like when I have newborns, like if I was stressed out, my baby would start crying because they felt their mother was stressed out. Children are very attuned. We grow up, we all start growing up and we get distracted. There's so many distractions to where everything is kind of like taking you away from yourself, from that intuition, from that inner voice. And we need to get back to that as adults and pass it to our children and let them know that, hey, that's important. The feeling you feel around people that aren't safe, listen to it because it's powerful, it's strong. Some of us mess up in life and we don't let our children keep that. We tell them to ignore it. We, make wrong decisions where they learn to never trust their inner voice. That comes with like building up your child's confidence too. So it's just there's so many aspects here that you can protect your children even in situations you can't be there in.
Yeah, it's all these things are that we asked. I think at some point within this, we asked kind of like, what could we do, or how could we, like? It's so much of that, right? Like all these things of building confidence in your youth and helping them cue in on these instinctual, inner voice type things. Like these are all ways we're preventing human trafficking. Like I don't want to
Mhm.
get dooming. I know some of the stories can be a little scary, and I don't want to get like doom and gloom because the focus really should be on exactly what you just shared there. Right. Like, there's a lot as parents, and there's a lot as parents we can do. There's a lot that we can do to
Mhm.
help build the confidence in our youth to ultimately combat this and keep them safe and build up those protective factors and resiliency against these tactics. I want to say we start and end every single curriculum lesson with mindfulness, right? It's so important. It's essential in being able to tune in, as you said, to your inner voice. So we start and end every single lesson with that because it's important in that dynamic. Oh, and I also love that you guys named your kid Xander. We named our kid Declan. Declan is my son's name, but it was between Declan and Xander. So it's kind of funny that you said that. I love that name. But they are so intuitive. They can sense that. My son's 5 months old and he can sense if I'm stressed out. It's funny, like on the weekends, he's so calm and like great and he's perfect. And then during the week, he's like extra fussy and it's because I'm stressed out and we're both like having to juggle all these different things and work and all of that. And it's so interesting how they can really, you see it in newborns, how they can really cue in on this. We all have it, right? It's all within us. And it's an instinctual thing that is there. Call it whatever you want. It's there. It's a matter of building confidence in that. It's a skill, right? Like if we can practice this skill, listening to that inner voice and consistently cueing in on that, there's a difference that we can make both in the fight against human trafficking and so many other instances in our lives of making good decisions and healthy relationships and all different types of positive outcomes and behaviors.
Yeah. It's crazy. The thing that I was told when I was a kid was, it's if a stranger offers you candy, tell them no. That was the big thing. That was the preventative talk with a lot of, the millennials is don't accept candy from strangers, right? I think about everyone heard that. And it's like nowadays with teenagers, it's not candy. It's people saying, "I understand you. Your parents don't get you. You're so mature for your age. You can trust me," and stuff like that. And that goes, hand in hand with all this, with that feeling connection when it's like, oh, whoa, if you're connected with your child and your child has that self-confidence and is in tune with their inner voice, their intuition, that kind of stuff is going to go, what do you mean my parents don't get me? My parents get me. Uh, you know, You understand me? You don't even know me. How can you understand me? How can I trust you? This there starts stuff. Only kids who are very feel very alone and very alienated from those closest to them in their lives will those types of things actually work on and start making them feel seen. Because if you have, and a lot of this will be with teenagers, and if you have a teenager who's not felt understood or seen their whole life, and then all of a sudden somebody comes by and starts giving them what they've been desiring or desires that they don't even know they have from, their younger adolescent years, that's where this becomes a really big thing. So I think it's really important for parents to understand. It's just not, you can't just say don't talk to strangers anymore, because we've already talked about the numbers. Most of this isn't strangers, it's people that they know, and stuff like that. And I wanted to give you some time. I had a question for you, Josh. A little scenario. I wanted to, if every parent in America was forced to sit in a room with you for 10 minutes, what would you teach them?
Interesting question. It would probably be, honestly, not to take what you just said there, but to take what you just said there. Traffickers, oftentimes in that like grooming and qualification process, they are essentially like putting out feelers for an individual who has that type of vulnerability, right? Who may be an easier target. They're looking for the path of least resistance. And so if you could sit down with a parent and say like, hey, if you could build confidence and instill in your youth, that they're loved, they're cared for, and they're supported with your child, that's going to do so much to when someone comes in and says, hey, your parents don't get you. And it's like, to your point, it's like a bump, and all of a sudden it's like, no, my parents get me. They love me and they care about me. And that strength and confidence, even just the ability to look someone in the eye. I knew of a situation where a trafficker would go around and at the time would try and like connect with these kids, and he could tell like if someone looked him in the eye that this kid was not what he was looking for, and continued on, and so on and so forth. And so even just that little bit of like being able to build and instill confidence, that security, this whole lesson in the idea of how can we build up the protective factors to keep kids safe. I would say that, I mean, I honestly share the story about the mom, their kid. That would be another thing, because I just, in hearing that, and hearing the difference that made in her son's life, man, it just, the difference that could make if we could have enough parents have that same conversation with their kids, because it's incredibly rough to have this youth who feels like they have no other option in their own life, right? Like, so to be able to have that conversation with enough parents to say like, hey, we need to show up for our kids so this doesn't continue to happen. I had someone do a presentation for us at our that Three Strands. They came as a guest speaker, and he shared a bit about that. And doing this job, you hear a lot of different things, but that was one situation. I'm specifically referencing like sextortion, where it even like hit me so hard of like, I've heard so many stories at this point, but even that just rocked me to say, wow, this is something that is happening to our youth, our young boys. It put me back in that age, when I was 15 and 16, and it could have easily happened to me. Right. And I was lucky to not have that situation, but like I could easily empathize with so many of these young boys going through that. So long-winded answer, I apologize. Long-winded answer is saying it would
Yeah.
be to sit down with these parents and give them that lesson of building confidence and protective factors in their youth.
Seems like that's such a multifaceted thing too. Just teaching kids
It changed
self-confidence,
the world.
it would just change the world, and not just in this area, just in so many
Lacking.
aspects of life.
I mean, yeah, think about like in decision making and career choosing and all these different things of, as we talked about before, like mental health, just having that support and that foundation could really change so many people's lives. And unfortunately, that's the thing, is we talk about traffickers are trying to find those who don't have that, and don't have the parents that are present, and don't have the parents who have had that conversation with their kids, right? That's what they're looking for. And unfortunately, that's the sad thing, is that it's why we focus on the school system, because what we found out from many survivors of human trafficking that we interviewed and consulted with is that growing up, no one ever told them they loved them. No one ever told them they mattered and that they were important. And so we have a lesson in our middle school, one that's called Protecting a Masterpiece. And in that lesson, we tell every kid that they're a masterpiece, because if they haven't heard that at home, we're going to make sure they hear it from us in the school system, because at some point, these kids need to hear that. Like, that makes a huge difference, knowing that you matter, that you're special, that you're important.
I think in society as a whole, like that is a very big mistake. Even if they don't have parents, like just someone in a child's life that kind of has that tether of connection to them, healthy connection. I think we have a lot of dysfunctional like connection, and you see the outcome of that. Like me and Trey have done several episodes on like emotional intelligence and that your children do not listen to what you say as much as they listen to who you are. They see who you are, they watch you, they mirror you. And if you're mirroring control, fear, dominance, that child is not going to come to you when they're 14 or 13 years old and some man is trying to do things to them and acting strange with them or trafficking and all these scenarios that happen and it does happen and they're in that alone. Even if they escape it, they're in that alone because they know they cannot tell anyone because there's no safety. And then these children become adults and they carry that and they go through life thinking that, oh, what was wrong with me? What did I do wrong? Maybe that was my fault. Especially young girls, right? Young girls have been taught to blame themselves when that stuff happens. "Oh, I must have not wore the right outfit. I
Mm.
didn't say the right thing." This stuff starts when there is no safety, there's no connection, and that is such a rampant problem. And then young boys, a young boy doesn't want to go tell that some man or woman made a move on him and this happened and they couldn't stop it. That's like, and there's so much guilt and shame around that that they're going to be silenced forever or they're not going to get help.
That was so deep what you said there that they don't listen to what you say, they listen to who you are. I'm going to steal that if you're okay with me stealing that, because
Yeah.
that is a
Yeah.
beautiful statement. And it is so true. And I think, you look at the way that, we are as a society these days. I think it's such an important piece to keep in mind. Like connection is essential to all of us. Connection is, as I think Trey mentioned earlier, like it is one of those things that traffickers are using and have vulnerability that they're preying on probably the most these days is connection and having somebody in their life that connects with them. And in this digital world, in this, post COVID existence that we're all in right now, like the opportunities for connection have gone down significantly. And thinking like as a society, we have to start adjusting that. We have to start learning these lessons. And with the rise of AI and where that's going, we have to be intentional about how we innovate, about how we structure these systems and these programs and all these different things so that we have a human connection and not just a technology connection, but an actual human connection so they know there's someone there. Especially as a kid, you got to know you have a trusted adult and someone that cares about you.
Did want to ask you, you've seen some of the darkest parts of humanity with this work that you've been in and probably heard some of the most horrendous stories. What gives you hope in all this? What because that's got to weigh heavy. What makes it gives you that light at the end of the tunnel, the sun on the horizon?
I would say the response, the amount of people that I've talked to, the good outweighs the bad in just such a significant way. I mean, 99% of the people I've talked to have been so receptive and willing to do whatever they could to help and contribute and recognize and see, especially once they learn about it, see that there's something that we need to do here and want to learn more and want to find a way to connect. Like the heart is there for it, and it's so encouraging. We have the opportunity to read stories by these are educators who actually participate in the program, and do our trainings or teach the curriculum in some way, shape, or form. And we have an opportunity to read the stories that they share afterwards, and we get feedback from them. And some of them are just so uplifting, and they really do bring such light when you get a chance to hear. These are people who are in the school system working with our youth, and oftentimes they're like required to do this training, and it's added on to their plate on the things that they have to do. And to hear after taking an hour training, they step up and they have these incredible stories. I have a couple I'd love to share. This is one talking about from an educator. It says, after completing the Protect training, I feel better equipped to approach youth interactions through a trauma-informed lens. Like catching that trauma-informed piece after that training and latching onto it is amazing. It goes on to say, this means being intentional about creating safety, both emotional and physical, by recognizing that each young person may have experiences or histories that are not visible to the surface. I could be more mindful of my tone, language, and body posture, ensuring I communicate respect, consistency, and care, right? Like they took the time, not required at all took the time to write that in and say, like, this is what I took from this. We constantly hear stories like that where they're like, man, after hearing this, I'm going to shift the way that I speak with my youth, and I'm going to shift the way I speak with my students. And
Mhm.
that's what gives me hope, is how much people are hearing this message and then consistently latching on to these concepts and be willing to.
Mhm. Exactly.
Oh, it's a great answer. Josh, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your heart and your mission. Where can uh, where can people find more about your organization and get involved and help out?
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is www.3sgf.org. It's the number 3sgf.org, or Google Three Strands Global Foundation. We have what we call the Protect program. Right now, our goal is to get it into every state in the US. So currently, I think we're at about 13 or 14, but we are, always trying to expand that to different communities throughout the country, finding opportunities to educate folks. So you can find more about that. And we have community trainings, we have parent trainings, we have different stuff about, how to have conversations with your kids. I mean, there's all sorts of resources on that website. And there's links to different training programs and portals and things that they can get. So, all things human trafficking prevention, especially on the education side of things, you can find there, as well as, all the stuff that we're doing. You can follow us on our socials. It's all around Three Strands on pretty much any platform that.
Well,
Great.
I will put that link in the description, and everybody go support Josh and what they're doing. I think it's one of the most important things going on right now. So again, Josh, thank you for coming on, and appreciate everybody tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Thank you.